Hi, my friend. Welcome back to Healing Together, a YouTube page that is dedicated to the God stories that happens in our lives. I'm so happy that you've come back to hear the stories of how God shows up in our everyday lives, whether it be to lead us to Him or whether it be to provide some kind of an answer to a prayer. I'm so glad you came back to hear those stories. Today we want to share with you my story, and I'm going to do that in the same format that I have with the other testimonies. We're going to talk today about some of the backstory to who I was and what was going on before the burns. And so today I want to share with you a little bit of how I was brought up. That story actually begins before I'm born. And my parents were married in 1950, and my dad was an alcoholic. My mother was the daughter of an alcoholic parents. And when my parents came together and got married in 1950, that tradition continued. That my father was an alcoholic, my mom did not necessarily drink, and life just continued on. Life very quickly got very rough for them. My parents lost 5 children in 5 years. I was born in the middle of them. So out of the 6 children, I was born number 3. That made life very tough. But life changed for them actually in 1953. Life changed on Christmas Eve when my Uncle Dwayne got saved in a Pilgrim Holiness Church. And so throughout the year, I never was able to get the story totally. But throughout the year, he must have worked on my mother, because from the way I've pieced it together, then in 1954 on Christmas Eve, my uncle took his sister, to that same church where my mom dedicated her life to Jesus Christ. Now my mother, like is in the story in Pebbles from the Path with my mother and my wife and my daughter, my mother quickly became a woman of prayer. As she was losing children and her husband was spiraling down, life was looking very grim. The police department had dedicated themselves to putting several of the Fletcher boys in our state penitentiary for a long time. One of them actually ended up there for some time, and it was very difficult for them. As life went on and Mom was praying and Dad was drifting more and more into the bar scene and fighting and in and out of jail, and I actually have his criminal record that was submitted when later on in life when he applied for a concealed weapons permit, and the letter that the police chief wrote. But in that setting, in the early 1950s, Mom began to pray. On March 30th, 1955, my dad came to Christ, and he dedicated his life to Jesus Christ, and it changed dramatically. My parents were dealing with a sister. They had already lost a boy and a girl, and my sister was fighting polio and the after effects of that. She had gotten the wrong vaccine that came to Niles, and it was a terrible time. In the midst of that, my mother became pregnant with me. I was born in October of 1955, and Dad had already come to Christ. So I had the privilege of growing up in a Christian home, but life never really got easy for them. In 14 years, they buried 14 family members. 5 of them were their own children. During that time, I also had several traumatic instances. When I was 8, I was teasing a dog, and the dog got a hold of me. He was a quite mean dog and tore off half of my face. 57 stitches, 3 days in a coma, 10 days in the hospital, and 1 reconstructive surgery brought my parents through that situation. My dad was in business. He couldn't always be there, and it was a tough time. And later on in life, about the time I was 11, I was one of the things that they thought came out of the other children was that there was something wrong in the blood. And when I was 11, whatever that thing was began to happen to me. And they watched it as it got worse and worse and worse. And at that point, at one point, the doctor said, if he does not start to show an improvement, we're going to have to start blood transfusions. At that day, on a Wednesday, I remember it very clearly because I hated the blood draws. They took me to church that night. They took me to the altar. They anointed me with oil, and I was healed. On Friday, when they did the blood draw, my blood was completely normal, and we never saw another problem with that. Now, that's a big deal when you think about that with the story that's going to begin over the next 6 months. From 11 until the time that I was 16, I pretty well grew up in church. My life evolved around church. I had a happy home life. I had a sister and I had a brother that came along a little bit later. My sister was 4 years younger than me, and we had that typical brother-sister relationship where we loved each other one moment and we did not love each other all that much the next moment, and then right back again. And we had a wonderful relationship. I still love my sister dearly. Pam is just a treasure beyond treasure. My brother Andrew came along as a surprise 12 or 13 years after I was born. Wonderful, wonderful Christian man serving Jesus Christ. And I just grew up in a very happy home. Life was very good for me. We enjoyed many things. My dad was an excavating contractor. We had a nice home. I worked. I mowed the yard. I began my driving career at 8 years old, and life went along very, very comfortably for us. I had a lot of friends. My church time was basically where I lived, and that's where I met my wife. When we figured that we met someplace when she was 3 and I was 4 years old. We grew up together in church. We had a youth group that we were active in. We had the little kids program that Debbie and I were active in. Life was very good in that whole season. I didn't overly care for school. I've never really loved being inside too much. I enjoy being outside. I was quite active. We had woods and fields around. I had a lot of friends. We lived on a street that had 2 of my dad's brothers. Now, by this time, both of those brothers were serving Jesus. And so the alcoholism was gone, and life was pretty peaceful. I had many cousins on the street, and there was many afternoon baseball games, softball games, football games. There was many fights and a lot of making up, and it just was good memories that came. As a boy, I enjoyed being outside. I enjoyed riding my bicycles. At a couple points in my life, I had more than one bicycle. I could choose whether I rode a Stingray or a English Racer or whatever it was. I was pretty well just a normal kid coming up to that time. I spent a lot of really great time with a cousin. Jeff and I were great friends, and his sister Teresa, especially Teresa and I would say Teresa and I probably were as close as anybody could be. We started school together. We went to school together. It was very traumatic in the first grade when they split Teresa and I up, and I don't know what they were thinking, but Teresa and Jeff and I stayed very close. We had a cousin, Wayne, who lived out a few miles away. Several times Jeff and I would make a bicycle trip out to see him, and it was like riding to the other side of the world. And life was just good, and what we experienced was good. My father was a Sunday school superintendent. It was just a good time. So I want to begin there, and I'm going to actually leave it there. We're at about our time, so we are going to share on tomorrow. Make sure you're here for David and Sarah, and then on Wednesday I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk about Debbie and I, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the people at church, Tim and Ted Mitchell, and some of the other ones. Some of them are already gone to be in glory, gone on to eternity. I'm going to share some of them. I want to share some about the ladies in our lives as teenagers that prayed over us and spent hours on their knees and really prepared us. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to share some of that stuff, what our church was for us. We were very active. My friend, thank you for stopping by. Make sure you stop by tomorrow and watch David and Sarah. Please take the time to hit that subscribe button if you've not. Hit the like button on the videos, and also, if you would, hit the notifications bell. We would appreciate it. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a great day. We'll see you next time when we find more healing together. Thank you.